politics, protests, human rights, justice, equity, community. RaceAware. What's up, everybody, and welcome to RaceAware, the podcast all about American race history and its overall impact on the lives of the marginalized. I'm Dr. Elise Richey, coming to you with my co-hosts Tony Szynski and Dan Sauber. Let's get started. Today we're discussing a loose overview of critical race theory. This topic is quite broad and too important to just fit into one discussion. So we're going to start here and then follow up with more episodes later. Hello and welcome everyone to the RaceAware podcast, where we, my co-host Tony Szynski, Dan Sauber, and I, Dr. Elise Richey, explore race history in society, government, corporations, and overall culture, and how it creates adverse psychological and economical impact to the lives of the marginalized. Today we're looking at the critical race theory and why it's under attack. Guys, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Will.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a little bit on the fence about discussing this. I feel like I don't know enough about it. And if I don't know enough about it, chances are that most people really don't know enough about this critical race theory, otherwise known as CRT. Mm-hmm. What about you guys?
Now, pretty much the same. It's been a crash course in learning about it.
Yeah. We are going to come onto topics that we're not experts on. I'm hoping to bring on someone that is an expert as a follow-up to this. So, Dan, how comfortable are you with this? When we decided to do this topic, were you feeling like, yeah, I'm the man on this topic, or were you like, I've got to learn this?
The interesting part for me was about the time I was learning about CRT, my daughter-in-law contacted me about it because it's having a big effect in the school system. So I started doing some research on it myself and found that, honestly, I knew very little about it.
Yeah. Some people are just hearing it for the first time.
Right.
Yeah.
I think what is interesting, though, is the knee-jerk reaction by so many people on CRT.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very knee-jerk, especially for something that most people admit that they really have never heard about it up until now.
Right.
Right. It's been around since the 70s, you know?
Oh, yes. It's been around for over 40 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so let's just start with the basics, okay? Let's take this. This is like a CRT 101 podcast. I was looking up CRT, and I said, well, how basic can I get it? So I decided to go with the definition or explanation provided by the Encyclopedia Britannica. Okay. Remember those? It's digital now. It's not that set that we all had back in the day.
Right.
All right, so the Encyclopedia Britannica describes CRT, or critical race theory, as an intellectual movement and loosely organized framework of legal analysis based on the premise that race is not a natural, biologically grounded feature of physically distinct subgroups of human beings, but a socially constructed, quote, socially invented, unquote, category that is used to oppress and exploit people of color. Critical race theorists hold that the law and legal institutions in the United States are inherently racist insofar as they function to create and maintain social, economic, and political inequities between whites and non-whites, especially African Americans. So what do you think about that definition? Do you think it's ambiguous?
No, I don't think so at all. I think
I was being facetious.
Which media outlet you listen to, it's going to be it's all bad because you're blaming white people for everything, or it's actually true. I do believe the United States is inherently racist. Not that we walk around with that in the back of our head, I've got to be racist today, but just our laws and the entire progression from inception to where we're at today has left a lot of people behind.
Yeah, exclusion. It's law by exclusion. Wow. I mean, this is a powerful definition, I think. What do you think, Dan?
I was a little surprised that it reached over different boundaries, such as sociology and literary theorists that got involved in this as well.
Mm-hmm.
When you first hear critical race theory, it's just, most people think it's just racism, and it's not just racism. It's the inequities that have come about as a result of this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, well, I was reading that at one time, Justice John Roberts said the way to stop discrimination on the basis of race is to stop discriminating on the basis of race. But Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she popped up and said it's very hard for me to see how you can have a racial objective but a non-racial means to get there. In other words, they wanted to solve the problem, but they didn't seem to be bringing the people to the table that are being affected by it.
Right. And also when that statement that Justice Ginsburg made also it sounds to me as if she's saying that you can't solve a racist issue by avoiding to talk about the racist issues.
Right.
You know, how are you going to solve the problem if you don't acknowledge it? If you spilled something on your kitchen floor, you have to acknowledge that there's a spill in order for you to actually take action to clean it.
Right.
Critical race theory was officially organized in 1989. That's what Dan was saying, that it's not new, okay? But 1989 is when it was officially organized at the first annual workshop on critical race theory, though its intellectual origins go back much further to the 60s and the 70s.
Yep.
The basic principles of critical race theory, also known as CRT, came out of a framework for legal analysis in the late 70s and early 80s by multiple legal scholars such as Derek Bell, Kimberly Crenshaw, and Richard Delgado. The immediate precursor of the CRT was the Critical Legal Studies, at the time CLS movement, which dedicated itself to examining how the law and legal institutions serve the interests of the wealthy and powerful at the expense of the poor and marginalized. Now, just that is so general. At the time, it doesn't even sound as if they were targeting certain race groups when they first started it.
Right.
So if you want to tell us some of the tenets, I'm going to just throw out a couple of frameworks that they worked on, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll come back and we'll start with the tenets that you brought to the table, Tony. Okay. All right. So examples of the framework that they worked, some of the framework that they worked off of, was in the 1930s. Government officials literally drew lines around deemed poor areas, and they deemed them poor financial risks, often explicitly due to the racial composition of the inhabitants. Banks subsequently refused to offer mortgages to black people in those areas,
which we call redlining.
Exactly. And another one was facially race-blind policies, like single-family zoning that prevents the building of affordable housing, and advantaged majority white neighborhoods, and thus stymied racial desegregation efforts. Okay, those are two of the ones that, as examples of using scientific methods to look at how the law was being dispensed and policies were being created for the general public.
Right.
After the break, the looking glass of race disparity framed by CRT. That's what we're going to be looking at. Tony's going to give us the tenets. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
We love bringing you the RaceAware podcast content. If you like what you hear, find our podcast valuable, and want to help us keep creating our content, show your support by spreading the word and partnering with us on Patreon for as little as $2.99 a month by going to patreon.com/RaceAware. Partners of the show get access to exclusive benefits such as private access to the RaceAware community, the digital downloads, voter power, free access to the live RaceAware lounge, supporter shoutouts, best of all, free RaceAware merchandise, and so much more. Check us out at patreon.com/RaceAware.
Thanks for staying with us. And we're back. You guys, you still with me?
Well, we're here.
You guys, you look so, like, depressed. This is not a depressing, it's not as depressing as it feels like then, you know.
I just think it's a low energy day today.
Yeah, today's kind of a low energy day, you know, but I think our fans will just, like, be okay. Maybe give us a boost.
There you go. Right.
Okay. Yeah, today, you know, we're recording on a Sunday, kind of relaxed. Somebody here, not me, was partying too much, and no, I'm just kidding.
No, we had a friend over last night for a wonderful evening of cocktails and snacks and art and conversation, and
oh, that's wonderful.
It was nice.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, a young artist in the area.
All right. I mean, I didn't do all of that. I was just watching horror movies.
Okay.
Yeah, the new movie came out, The Conjuring.
Yes, you've mentioned that before.
Yes. It was good. Thanks for asking.
Just the title alone scares me.
Yeah, he's not going to want to know.
I know, he doesn't like it, but you know what? I'm your friend, and you don't have to watch it, but you can at least support me.
Tell me, Will. We bring this back, and I'll tell you the 5 tenets of CRT.
Okay, let's do it.
I am. Okay, number 1. It claims that it's the notion that racism is ordinary and not an aberration.
Mm-hmm.
2, the idea of interest convergence, and I'll get into that in a second.
Okay.
3, the social construction of race. 4, the idea of storytelling and counter-storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And 5, the notion that whites have actually been recipients of civil rights legislation. So, taking them one at a time. The notion that racism is ordinary and not aberrational, and I believe we can look at that just the way our laws have been written from day one. Back in the founding days, you had to be a white landowner in order to have a vote. If you didn't own land and were white, you didn't get a vote. If you had less than 100% white blood in your system, whatever that is, you were considered non-white, no matter what the percentage was. And of course, women had no vote and no say whatsoever. So we started off with a very exclusionary foundation for who could have a say. And then flash forward to the 60s, and women couldn't get a bank account open in their own name without a man's approval. You know?
I don't mean to laugh, but that really sticks in your craw because every time
it does. It blows my mind.
You mention that.
It blows my mind. I look at my cousin Caroline, and I'm thinking to myself, how the hell did she do what she did without her dad or her brother or non-existent husband trying to get her to do stuff? And she was very successful. But I can't imagine what she went through.
Well, what she went through is what a lot of people who are marginalized go through every single day of their lives. Challenge after challenge after challenge. Something that can be done within seconds ends up being done over weeks and months because of all the challenges and all the barriers and walls that you have to transverse.
Mm-hmm. And flash forward to just this past election, you know, we have certain areas where the state is cutting back on polling places where you can vote, making it very inaccessible for people to vote. People were in line for 14 hours in certain parts of Georgia just to vote. That's unreal.
But this is the culture. That's the culture that America was built on, making things difficult for those that you want to exclude.
And ironically enough, they were non-white people that had to wait 14 hours.
Right.
I went to vote. I was in and out in 20 minutes.
Yeah. And it depends on where you live, because where I live, it takes me longer to drive to the polling area than for me to vote. And believe me, it doesn't take very long to drive there at all.
Yeah, and I gave up because I was afraid that I wouldn't get in to vote, so I completely mail in everything now.
Well, they're trying to cut that out too, Dan.
That's what yeah. Especially down here in Florida. They're trying to eliminate that, or at least reduce the amount of time you can use mail-in voting.
So the second tenet was the idea of an interest convergence. And they described that as the status quo saying, what's in it for me?
Okay, so who's saying what's in it for me? The people who are in control?
The people who are basically Bell's 1980 theory of interest convergence is a critical component within the cogs of CRT. Common sense beliefs are formulated by the majority status quo. The beliefs created by the majority, the haves, oppress minority groups, the have-nots, or have too littles. Okay, well, this is what I want to ask here. So if that's the component that they're saying that's, and we know that that's what happened, okay, because a false majority was created with exclusion. Right. But now we're at a watershed moment where the demographics have so drastically changed that the majority, okay, would be making the rules or making the policies going forward. But now it's no longer accepted by the same group that created that same tenet. Do you understand what I'm saying? Well, this particular theory goes on to say, stated more precisely, interest convergence is the notion that whites will allow and support racial justice progress to the extent that there is something positive in it for them. That doesn't even sound like it's going to solve anything. No.
No, and the more sophisticated we get, the more issues we have to deal with CRT, including Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ clubs in schools, diversity training, organizations. California recently had ethnic studies model curriculum for free speech in colleges. So it seems like the more progressive we get, the more the CRT seems to have an effect on it.
Well, the CRT is a problem. Right. They're looking at it as a problem. But the CRT is, make no mistake, it's not only for African Americans, although that's the sore, that's the canker, the cancer of America with racism. And the CRT is inclusive of everyone that is marginalized.
Right.
Actually, if you go back to CLS, the precursor to CRT, right, feminism was a huge component in the CLS portion.
Right. That's why I was saying that it right. started out broad. It didn't right. start out as let's look at how African Americans are being impacted. It was a broad, let's look at how the law is affecting the population.
Yeah, I go back to something that Trevor Noah said on The Daily Show, being raised in South Africa where he was under apartheid rule.
Mm-hmm.
When Nelson Mandela was released and became president, and they had the study about apartheid, and they had the conversation, and it was government sanctioned. It may not have had the anticipated outcome they had hoped for, but it furthered the dialogue. It forced the dialogue. Here in this country, we just don't want to have this discussion at all.
Well, it's because of all the brainwashing. You know, it's not about having a discussion, and people are okay. Well, let's just go to the table and have the discussion. People have literally been brainwashed to think that having the discussion is admitting that they're accomplices to everything that's happened since the inception of America.
Right.
So what accomplice is going to voluntarily go to the police station to provide a statement or be questioned?
Right.
And, you know, and it's funny because the third one, the social construction of race, instead of saying we're all human beings, what was it, back in the 17 or 1800s, that one guy came up with whites on top, and then lighter skinned, and then working their way down Asians, then all the way down to African Americans. And then, of course, the more pure white you were, the smarter you were, the darker skin you were, the less intelligent you were. And this whole thing is perceived, it was all based on one guy's thoughts of how the races should be exhibited or displayed or taught about. But in fact, everything shows we all came out of Africa. I mean, all the fossils show we came out of Africa. So we just need to stop this division of I'm white, you're black, you're brown, you're this, you're that, and start looking at each other as people.
No, I don't understand how it got this far. You know, I wasn't there when it started, but at this point now, we're supposed to be civilized. We're supposed to be intellectual in a society, and this is the most ignorant concept that it's almost right up there with the world is flat.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? I mean,
I do.
And once again, it's all because of literally, it started off as rationalization, okay, and then it became survival.
Right.
Okay? If you set up a system that where your survival depends on subjugating other people, you find ways to keep that going.
So there was a time when this sort of thing, like critical race theory, could actually endure, you know, intellectual debates. We don't even do that anymore.
Right, they just want to dismiss
we're picking sides, and instead of understanding the problem with race in this country, we just pick a side, and that's where we stay. And we're never going to get anywhere like that.
You know, people are picking sides off of climate change, even though their asses are being dragged by every manner of storm, fire, you know, pestilence. They're still sticking to the denial.
Yes, even though we've got proof.
Doesn't matter. Proof doesn't matter around here.
So, well, let me ask a question based on an experience I had. So, way back when I was 7 years old, one of my friends, their mom asked my mom if I could go to Yankee Stadium and go to a ball game with their church group. My mom said yes. We show up, and it was a black church, and so I'm the only white kid surrounded by 150 black people on 5 buses going to Yankee Stadium.
Uh-huh.
The shock that I was a white person surrounded by black people lasted maybe 10 seconds because I was too busy hanging out with my friend, and we were kids, and the rest were adults, and when kids block adults out, you're just with your friend.
Right.
I've never really thought of that since that time. On a day-to-day basis, how often do you feel like you can be yourself when you will go anywhere and you're not the majority person in the room?
Well, I grew up like that, Tony. I mean,
right.
I grew up in predominantly white everything. You know, it's nothing for me to be the only black person in the room, at the conference, whatever it is, wherever it is that I'm participating, whatever I'm participating in or involved in. That happens. I guess, what's your question? How do I feel? Or am I myself?
Where do you find that you can actually breathe and not be looking over your shoulder? Because I would imagine that's got to be a very tense situation because you just don't know.
Well, here's the thing. I think that's a really good question to ask someone black, okay? And I know that we do this podcast. We haven't done like a visual of ourselves. I know you guys see our pictures on everything, but I'm black. I'm Caribbean origin. It's a good question, and my answer to that is I think that black people are so used to it that we almost can't answer that question. You have to find a way to just be, or we found a way to be comfortable where we are, vigilant, always, and that's the answer that I have, because, and you're constantly like that. So if when you really look at it, if you really think about it, it's a stressful way to live, even though we're used to it. Black people have accommodated themselves to that kind of stress.
I can't imagine.
Well, to the point where you don't feel it like stress because you've accommodated to it.
Right.
That's how you live.
Well, and it's interesting on the series that they've had on TV, Soul of a Nation. One question that's asked every episode, they have this almost like a round table they call the kitchen, and the question is posed, when was the first time you realized you were black?
Mm-hmm.
And more often than not, the majority of people say it was very early on, which plays into what you were just saying, Will, that you've had to deal with it for so many years that you don't even realize that you have to do it.
Right. And the thing is, here's another thing that to twist your mind. You get so used to it, right, that when something happens that if something like happens where somebody throws it in your face that you're black, you're almost shocked. It's almost like you're shocked, but you're not shocked at the same time. You're just like, it's kind of, you become almost desensitized because you're used to having to do whatever it is that you do to survive each day.
Right.
I know it sounds dramatic, and if you ask black people,
it's a rough way to do things.
Well, if you ask black people, it's not dramatic that way. It's just how we all live. Every black person, if you go someplace and you see a couple black people, what I call like you sprinkle of pepper, okay, black people, and they're all disseminated in the room, but they can all see each other. There's always an acknowledgement of each one. They could be, feet away from each other, but they always acknowledge each other, okay? And if something's happening, all right, those black people are usually the first ones. They acknowledge each other, and they get the hell out of there, okay? Because black people are always no matter what level you've reached in this country, whether you're, laborer, whether you're professional, whatever, everybody, and even the ones who act like that they're totally accepted by the white community, they still have a sense of fight or flight when it comes to race issues.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? We might not look like it, and that goes to show you that we've been living with it so long that people don't even realize that.
Right.
What's the point? When Black people have been voicing out these concerns for I don't know, for hundreds of years at this point.
Well, it was several years back, Chris Rock on one of his shows asked the audience in general, how many of you white folks want to trade places with me? And don't forget, I'm rich. And nobody took him up on it.
Because it doesn't, like I said, because it doesn't matter. Do you think Chris Rock, because he's rich, is worried about his kids? No, he's worried about his kids.
He did say, when he's driving his car, he said he knows no cop behind him is going to know it's Chris Rock until they get right up to his face. He said, I'm just another black guy driving a car.
Exactly. And here's the thing. Even if the cop does recognize him as Chris Rock, there's a 50-50 chance that the cop will be like a fan or a resentful white cop that this black man is doing better than him.
Right.
So, no, it's like a no-win situation living in a racial environment that you are expected to be a part of and produce in.
And this is going a little off topic, but the nuances get really kind of crazy. We recently watched that special on Mike Tyson, and it dealt with a lot of the rape trial.
I didn't see that.
By a black girl against Mike Tyson. And yet still, when the verdict came in that he was found guilty, people took his side versus the side of the black girl. And they were saying that it was the white people wanted to see a wealthy black guy taken down because he'd gotten too far advanced.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're right. There's a lot of nuance, and those nuances have gotten more complicated over time. Those nuances existed back in slavery time, okay, and they've just gotten more and more complicated to navigate these days.
Well, and there's always a group of people that's ready to remind you of that, whether it be through a name or some misnomer that we've heard through the years, which is something we're going to get into later. But it's like there's always that reminder of who you are and what you are.
Mm-hmm.
And that spreads across all the races.
Right.
It's just a way of keeping you down.
Yeah. Well, Tony, what's the next tenet?
Okay, so the next one was listed as the idea of storytelling and counter-storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very quickly scrolling back here to look up the okay, the idea of storytelling comes from its powerful, persuasive, and explanatory ability to unlearn beliefs that are commonly believed to be true. CRT calls this concept storytelling and counter-storytelling. The dichotomy, storytelling, counter-storytelling, is predicated upon the belief that schools are neutral spaces that treat everyone justly. However, close examination refutes this. Simply evaluating graduation rates accomplishes this. School curricula continue to be structured on mainstream white middle-class values. Now, as a mainstream white middle-class person, I would say to some extent that is true, because if I look back on all the history I've learned, so much of what I know now today I was never taught in school as part of curriculum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I mean, history has been whitewashed, period. Yeah. And they're still trying to do it now because they're really fighting against this whole critical race theory from being household knowledge.
Right.
Well, look, we just came off the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa riot, or the race massacre, actually, because it wasn't a riot.
Well, there's a whole. That's just one.
Oh yeah, because there's Rosewood in Florida. There's Fremont. There's Charleston. There's
more than that. There's more than that. It was a rash. A rash. Anywhere that Black people were doing well in their own little communities, they were targeted.
Right.
So what's the next tenet?
And the last one is the notion that whites have actually been recipients of civil rights legislation. The example they used there was desegregation.
Mm-hmm.
How that has actually benefited white communities, because you have, for the vast majority, people of color are bused into white neighborhoods more than white people are bused into
Black neighborhoods.
You don't have whites going to Latin schools, but you got Latins going to white schools. Blacks go to white schools. Not many whites go to black schools. So there's a great imbalance.
Well, that goes back to the first or the second one that said that they're willing to go along with it as long as there's something in it for them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I guarantee you, if they had come out and said, okay, your white kids are going to school 101 that's primarily located in a black neighborhood, I guarantee you no white parent would let their kid do that.
When they get in a bind, they always go after the schools and the school kid, just like with the critical race theory right now.
Right.
The schools, some of the schools in Florida are trying their best to make this a go. They want it to actually be a rule of thumb. Well, the minute some of the white parents got that email saying what they were going to do, they started pulling their kids out saying, oh, they're just trying to make white people look mean.
Yeah, I want to post that email. You want to send it to me so we can put it up?
I'm still working on it because not everybody got it. I got this information from somebody that has kids in the schools, and she called me right away.
All right, so we'll wait until everybody gets the surprise and shock, and then we'll share it with our listeners.
Right. But they put out the tenets of this, and there was nothing in it. I read the paper they put out, and there was nothing harmful or degrading or picking on white people. It was about everybody being treated equally.
Let's talk about that in our next segment. Okay. All right, right now we're going to take a quick break. When we return, we're going to look at some of the oppositions, okay, the people who are opposing and challenging the CRT. Stay with us, guys. We'll be right back.
RaceAware. We love bringing you the RaceAware podcast content. If you like what you hear, find our podcast valuable, and want to help us keep creating our content, show your support by spreading the word and partnering with us on Patreon for as little as $2.99 a month by going to patreon.com/RaceAware. Partners of the show get access to exclusive benefits such as private access to the RaceAware community, the digital downloads, voter power, free access to the live RaceAware lounge, supporter shoutouts, best of all, free RaceAware merchandise, and so much more. Check us out at patreon.com/RaceAware.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. This is our last segment of this episode. All right, guys, I'm glad that we got our Patreon up finally.
Yes, this is really exciting. We're definitely moving along.
Yeah, I think our listeners will be an added help to get the word out of what we're trying to do and get our podcasts and our videos viewed, and hopefully they really do find value in what we're trying to do here.
And I'm looking forward to having some other people come on with us and hearing other viewpoints as well, too. The more we can talk, the more we can learn.
Yeah, with the Patreon, it gives us a way to actually communicate with our listeners. So it'll also help us do topics that our listeners actually really want to hear us talk about, because they'll be able to communicate with us directly.
So we were talking before the break about CRT, the school systems, and now we're looking at talking about why it's under attack and why people are feeling offended by this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know, my family came over from Eastern Europe at the very turn of the century, 1900s. So my family's only been in the United States a little over 120 years.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, even though I can't go back to the Mayflower or Plymouth Rock, I can state just fine that, yeah, we've had definite problems with race relations all through the years, including up through the Civil War, Jim Crow, the 1950s, the 1960s. We're still not where we need to be. And I don't understand why so many Caucasian people can't acknowledge a simple viewpoint or fact.
Well, it's a little inconvenient, Tony. I mean, think about it. How are they looking at this? They're looking at it, if they admit that this happened, then what? The world is going to flip on a dime, and all of a sudden all the marginalized people will be in charge, and then they'll be slaves? Maybe that's what they're thinking? Because it just doesn't make any sense that you would turn your back on facts. You know, and here's the other thing too. It costs so much money that we're losing as a nation to keep racism alive.
Yeah.
Billions. This doesn't make any sense. I don't know. You'd have to ask one of the people that, maybe we'll have to get somebody that really feels that this is like a threat to them to come and try to enlighten us as to why they feel so threatened by this.
According to Dan's report on the flyer they put out down south in the school system, white parents are pulling their kids out of school because of CRT.
Really?
Yeah.
Just pulling kids out of school.
Yeah, already. It hasn't even gone into effect yet, and they're so threatened by this. And honestly, the thing is, they're saying that it hurts white people. It's making white people look bad.
How does it hurt white people? I don't understand that. How does?
Because you're training a 7-year-old that you're white, therefore you're bad. Your people did this, so that's what I'm taking away from it.
But that's how they're interpreting it.
Right.
You know? Well, look. So I hate to do the whataboutism, because we just came out of the whataboutism 4 years of hell. Okay, but what about all these years, all these centuries of making other people look like criminals, animals, bad? So I hate to say it, but if we can survive it, I don't know why you can't survive it.
You know, it's funny, I go back to that great interview with Muhammad Ali talking about black versus white, and it just pervades everything. It's like angel food cake, devil's food cake, white, black, blackmail.
Right.
And he had a whole list, and it was quite comical, but at the same point, you realized throughout all of our existence, all these phrases were just
totally indoctrinated that everything black is wrong, is bad.
Right.
Well, it's interesting too when we start talking about CRT, and when I got that notice about the schools, I realized that it's as if when the non-white races get a foothold, that's when it seems to get that much worse. You know, we've all heard the different racial slurs through the years, and I've been around longer than I care to admit sometimes, but they've always been around. But they never die. They never actually go away. So I went online and I talked to some of my friends on Twitter that aren't white, and just to get their opinion. It would be easy for me to sit here and say, okay, this is what I've heard. But to go to people that have experience, I thought would be more of an impact. And my one friend, he's Spanish, part Mexican and part indigenous Indian. And I asked him, and he said they still think we're lazy. They still think we're here illegally. And funny enough, his mother heard these same things 40, 50 years ago, that she was lazy. And yet She put herself through college and became a registered nurse. But it's like no matter what they do to dispel these lies, they just keep telling them. There was another gentleman that spoke to me on Twitter. He's from the Middle East. And you know what? He didn't even tell me which country he came from because he said it doesn't matter.
I was just going to say, what does it matter?
It doesn't. You know? Because they look at them all the same. Exactly. Honestly, people believe they all ride camels and live in tents. He's actually gotten that from people since he's been here, and he's up for citizenship. But some people just won't stop reminding them of what they think they are. I found it getting some of the tweets from them. It broke my heart reading them because I know these people, and I thought it's really telling. They just will not let it go.
At least you opened up that conversation, and you have some compassion for the people that you care about. You have compassion for strangers. But when you hear these hard stories from people that you actually know, it pulls at your heart. And you become...
Those are the ones that would actually discuss it. There were some that I knew that they just didn't feel comfortable, even though I wasn't going to use their names. They just couldn't do it.
So what about these people that are out there that claim that they have friends? Some of them even have family that would fall into the marginalized category, okay? And they would hear those tweets, those comments in your tweets, and not be moved, not a centimeter.
Right, exactly. Because in their mind's eye, I'm the one lying, not them. They really believe this. It boggles my mind. It's just plain ass sad.
I know we've discussed about having some form of answer on the shows. I think as much that could be the thing that we're striving for, or maybe having shows like this will help bring us closer to finding solutions and finding answers to how to fix things and maybe bring some action about.
Right.
But sitting here, like I think, Tony started out when we were getting ready to get on the show. He said, is it just me, or does it feel like a low energy day? I really feel like it's not because it's Sunday. It's not because it's a low energy day, or it's not because we partied the night before and so we're kind of like tired or hungover or whatever right now. It's simply because of the topic itself. It's the topic and that overwhelming feeling of helplessness because we don't have a concrete solution. We don't have a plan of action. We're still at the beginning stage where people are debating whether it's happening or not. It's ridiculous.
It really is.
People's lives have been lost, hurt, thwarted, forfeited, and we're still discussing if this thing is happening?
Right. And for people like us of a certain age, we've been watching this happen for 40 or 50 years. And for people to say it's not happening, no, in some ways it's gotten worse.
One of the things I fear is that, the newer generations who are less racially divided, they're more racially inclusive. I'm afraid that they don't understand that this is always a threat. And it's a threat because it's never gone away. It's always been there, and we're actually operating in a racist system. So it doesn't matter if you're kumbaya, young, and you accept all the colors of your friends, because you're still operating in a racist system.
And I look at the what I call the young gays, the kids in their 20s who are coming out, and so they're so proud of to be out of the closet, and that's great. But they think that just because now marriage is legal, everything is so hunky-dory, everything needs to be fun. Like, you got to keep your guard up because you could be attacked any time.
Right, and the attack that I'm talking about is not the physical attack, like being bashed or hurt or shot or whatever. I'm talking about, that's a problem. Those are problems. I'm talking about what's happening now is these people are trying to recapture the power so that they can reinstitute and strengthen the racism and the exclusion of everyone that they deem not part of their group.
Exactly.
And what I'm saying that I'm scared of or I'm fearful of is that the young folks, like you mentioned, Tony, that they think because they have gay marriage, then everything is hunky-dory okay. All right? And it's not. People who are in interracial relationships, they think that, we're in post-racial America. We are not. All the mulattoes that are walking around, the mixed children, okay, they're mixed, they're beautiful, they're everywhere on television, in the media. We are not in post-racial anything. And the bottom line is that they think that everything is solidified. It's not solidified. Some of the laws that were written have expiration dates.
Yes,
okay?
They do.
And they have to be reviewed. Why? Why should they be reviewed by white policy makers if marginalized people have a right to do anything?
Right.
Look at our new Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland. First Native American or indigenous person had that position, and yet they were terrified to put her in that position because they're afraid she's going to screw things up for the existing power players, oil, coal, the people with the money.
Plus, I think they were afraid that they would all get scalped. Well, you might as well throw that in. This is ridiculous,
Right.
Unbelievable. And
yes,
it's just
right in there with being lazy and riding camels.
Yes. It's a shame that someone who's Native American is now finally in a position of power in their own country that was stolen.
Over the land they hold sacred.
Right. It's unbelievable.
Yep.
I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up.
Well, you can if you're Rick Santorum and just natives have no bias within our country today because they were barely here.
They were barely here. How are you barely here? Oh, my God. He's a lawyer.
I think so.
Now, I'm going to say it again. All these people, I don't know what they did in school. They must have had old tests, cheating material, whatever, because they are so friggin' dumb. It's unbelievable.
It's called keep the status quo.
Yep, keep the status quo. Yep. Last words.
Well, I guess the last word for me is going to be, honestly, I don't know how people of color have done this for so many years. I've only gotten really involved the past 10 years of being aware of what's going on, and you probably have to talk about this every single day, and I don't know how you've done it.
But the thing is, we don't talk about it every single day. I mean, we talk about it when something outside of the usual happens. If we were to talk about this, how our experiences every day, we'd get nothing done. We'd get nothing done.
Right.
Well, all I know is that there's a lot of talk right now about how it's got to be reversed. Whites have to start talking to people of color and listening, not just talking for the sake of talking.
Right.
And making excuses.
Yeah, and I think my last words have to be thank you to those who sent me tweets and DMs telling me about their experiences. It's rough. It hurt, and yet they did it. And I feel honored that they trusted me with that information.
Yes.
So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Well, I can't top any of those last words. I really don't feel like I even have a last word on this topic. I still feel the same way I felt at the beginning of the show.
And that's sad.
Yeah. I guess that's my last word. You know, we're not young, and frankly, you know, I'm keeping it going, but sometimes I feel like I just want to put my totem down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like it's time for me to pass my totem to the next generation and let them deal with it.
Definitely.
But that's just not in my makeup. I curse myself up for that every day. I just can't not advocate, you know. But, you know, we just do it, keep doing it. We get our victories. But I would like to see a major, total watershed victory before I die.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
Agreed.
I would ask people to invite people that are different from you into your home and break bread with them. Because until you start actually sitting down with people, sharing food, and talking the real talk, you're not going to get to know the other person.
Yeah.
Right, and don't do it like you're doing them a favor either.
Right.
Do it because you really want to get to know the person, and you really want them to get to know you. Because, you know, make no mistake, for all the stereotypes that you have of marginalized people have plenty of stereotypes about white.
Yeah, they do.
All right, I'm just going to say it because, you know, these people really think that, you know, they're above even being judged. You're being judged. You've been being judged. So you're not doing anybody a favor by bringing somebody into your life to get to know it. You shouldn't even be looking at it like that. You should be looking at it as, I really want to understand what's going on. I have a black neighbor. I don't even know him or her. I want to get to know him or her. And I want them to get to know me. Because a lot of people, white people, are saying, well, I'm not racist. Guess what? We don't know that. Because there's plenty of white people that walk around as if they're not racist, but behind your back, they're doing plenty of racist things to put barriers in your way, to rob you of opportunity, to get you in trouble.
Definitely.
We don't know that.
Right.
On that note.
Have a nice day.
That was my scolding for the day.
Well, I'll just say this. If a white person out there ever gets invited to a black barbecue, you're a fool not to go.
Well,
The best damn food you've ever had.
That food is good.
Oh, it is good.
Ain't no raisins in the potato salad there.
No.
All right.
For a book.
We want to thank you guys for spending this time with us on RaceAware. As always, if you found the podcast valuable, please subscribe, share, and leave us a comment. Let us know what you thought about it. Let us know what you want to hear us talk about.
Protest.
Next. Remember to visit our website.
Human rights.
RaceAware.rock.
Justice.
That's
Equity.
RaceAware.rock.
Community.
Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on
RaceAware.
Facebook and our Instagram. And don't forget, if you want to have even more interactions, then go ahead and subscribe to our Patreon platform, and that way we can get to know you better. You can help us develop our platform and watch it grow with us. Until next time, stay safe, informed, and race aware, because truth matters.
Politics. Protest. Human rights. Justice. Equity. Community. RaceAware.